Hey everyone, this is Signs of Contradiction, Episode 3. I'm Joe Grimberg, along with my friend Harold. We're going to be discussing Pope John Paul II's canonization on Sunday, so we're really pumped up about that. We're both going to give our little testimonies about how Pope John Paul, basically the Pope that we've only really known most of our lives. Harold, what, you were born in 77?
77.
I was born in 76. So he's the only Pope we really have known that way. Obviously, we'll know the other two pretty well too, but we're going to talk about how he influenced our lives and how he's influenced our spiritual journey and the importance he has meant to the church. And we'll be discussing that. And also, it's interestingly enough that it's also celebrating Divine Mercy Sunday, which Pope John Paul was a big supporter of and really helped push that through. So we'll be discussing that a little bit too and the importance of that in today's world. But first off, Harold, we're going to talk a little bit about your experience with Pope John Paul II. And go ahead, Harold.
Yeah, well, as you said, Pope John Paul II was the only Pope that we knew growing up. There's a Marvel Comics edition about Pope John Paul II. Do you remember that?
I do. I do remember. I was actually going to mention that. But that was, I remember.
That was like my first introduction to the Pope.
That's funny.
And,
same here.
Mm-hmm. Just reading about his life growing up in Poland around the Nazi occupation, the Nazi invasion of Poland in the late 1930s, and how he grew up in a communist, as well as later after the Nazis left, communism took over Poland, and talked about his experiences and how he had to go undercover to the seminary, get ordained a priest, and as a university professor, he used to take his students up to the mountains where they would go hiking and swimming and everything and canoeing, and they would have mass outdoors, and they would avoid detection from the communists that way. And it's very interesting to read about his life. I learned a little bit about him growing up. But when I got older, I could care less about the Pope. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you're more focused on what's going on in your life, and it's understandable.
I guess he wasn't really relevant, or I didn't make him relevant. I guess I just forgot about what I read about him. It was later, in the year 2000, when I kind of started paying attention to the Pope. And I remember I watched him on TV when he went to the Holy Land, when he went to Palestine. And, it was really moving for me to see him walking in the footsteps of Christ, walking in the places where Jesus Christ walked and spoke and lived. That was really powerful to me. And, seeing him as fragile as he was, with a lot of vitality, he still had energy. He had a strength about him.
Exactly. A spiritual strength that outweighed his physical impairment.
Exactly.
It really was actually, not to interrupt you, but that actually made as he got older and fragile, that made his message even more powerful, which ties into the Signs of Contradiction theme that we have talked about a lot. It's just the inside strength that God gives when your body fails. God makes up for that with spiritual strength. We saw him with Mother Teresa as well. Just this strength that you're like, wow, actually it's more powerful when he's weak.
Yeah, and you know, I think he mentioned that about himself. Don't judge his actions. Judge him first and foremost by what's going on inside of him. The spiritual life that is making him do what he does. You know, um, it's what he was on the inside that he really wanted people to take into consideration when thinking about his life. And, you know, I think that's really where he got his strength from prayer, from praying every day and spending time with God. And just that was where he spent his day first before going out and meeting people.
Well,
he would need that.
Exactly, to be able to be with Christ so he could be Christ to other people. And it's a great example for all of us, like, with our struggles. We got a Catholic church nearby. I mean, whenever we can, even if we can't, we can do spiritual, you know, Eucharistic adoration.
Yeah.
But it just shows you where he got his strength from.
And, you know, it's evident from his growing up in, you know, Nazi-occupied Poland and then communist run Poland. Where did he get his hope?
And that's a huge example too. I mean, we haven't really been in that kind of situation or even imagined a situation like that. Yeah, exactly. He kept the faith, and that's nothing other than supernatural, pretty much. The man had so much suffering. He lost his dad growing up, his mom, his brother, you know, and basically, he was a man of suffering. But I really think, you know, his spirituality obviously helped him get through that as well.
He suffered a lot. At the end of his life, he could hardly even speak, and yet he was still going.
You know, his body would be shaking. You know, the effects of Parkinson's. Yet he didn't, he didn't give up. And we saw it a couple times when Harold and I actually, kind of, not really met the Pope, but we saw him personally, so we really saw a man that was suffering, but the strength he had was incredible. I don't know tell us a little bit about your experience actually going to World Youth Day or any other times that you saw the Pope.
Well, when I started learning about the Pope, I really wanted to, meet him. Actually, I really wanted to meet him. I had the desire to just talk to him and get some of his inspiration, because I really felt that he could have something to share with me about suffering, about going on, some encouragement. Whenever I saw him on TV, I was encouraged. In the year 2002, I found out that World Youth Day was going to take place in Toronto, Canada, and I thought, you know, the Pope is really old. I mean, I don't know how long, you know, I don't want to put it in those terms, but I was thinking about his lifespan, and if I would ever get a chance to meet him, if he would be coming this close ever again. It turns out that World Youth Day 2002 will be taking place in Toronto. So I planned to go. I mean, I did everything I could to arrange that. And there was a lot of hardship involved with that.
Yeah.
And
it's what they call a pilgrimage, right? You're going to have pieces of the cross with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be a pilgrimage.
It's rough. I mean,
yeah, it can be really rough when you're traveling. It's amazing that you stuck to it, and obviously you remember the experience of seeing the Pope, so that probably overrode every difficult part of the trip.
Just seeing him, you know, it made up for all the hardships. You know, I saw him I saw his helicopter flying above the field there, and I actually got to see him from a few feet away, maybe 10 feet away from his Popemobile. So I saw him there. I did see him from that close. So,
yeah, that's awesome.
It wasn't as close as I would have liked, but hey,
We'll
but
talk
now,
about it, so.
It occurred to me when he died, I was really devastated, watching him.
Yeah.
I really thought he would recover, and I even it's silly to think about now, but I even prayed that he would rise from the dead. But poor man, he had a lot to suffer. I mean,
yeah, I don't think you
it was
would
his
want
time
that.
it's his time to go. I mean, yeah.
You pray for him, he's
Didn't want
like,
to
Harold, let
suffer
me go, man.
anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because obviously, anyone who would rise now would probably have to die again and await the final resurrection.
Yeah.
So, he would have to do that all
over again.
And,
No, you wouldn't want to do
I
that.
wouldn't want to wish that on him.
Yeah.
So, I started thinking that now I actually am closer to him. I can actually.
Well, now you can say, pray for us.
Yeah. As Catholics, we believe that those who have gone before us, they are close to God now, and they can intercede for us. And we can actually, because we are in Jesus Christ, we can communicate with them. We can ask them for prayers.
It's the beauty of the Catholic Church. We have friends up in heaven that can ask for us. They're more worthy than we are, so why not get someone that's high up there to put in a good word for us?
Yeah, so, I was really encouraged by that fact that he really knows me. He knows who I am. To this day, I'm so inspired by his witness, his example, and his words, be not afraid. It really gave me a lot of hope and courage to see him persevere in spite of all his weaknesses and sufferings, and just carrying on and seeing himself as united with the crucified Christ.
Yeah, and then what's amazing though? He really was an active person.
Yeah.
So that really had to be a struggle to have to undergo being immobile and not be able to do things yourself. So that really was a heavy cross for him. Yet you're right, Mom. No matter what he went through, there was a sense of joy. Whenever I think of Pope John Paul II, I think holiness is not boring. And it's not fuddy-duddy. It's being real. It's just amazing. He's just challenges the young people. Holiness is attainable. Yeah. Greatness, the world is looking for greatness, not mediocrity. And it really saw the youth. He had an enthusiasm of the youth, which rubbed off on the youth. They had a lot of, they were really inspired by Pope John Paul II. And he really influenced a lot of vocations. And he had such a sense of humor, too. I forget, when he got shot or something, he was even joking with the people that were taking out the bullet. Like, he was even joking with someone. I think I heard a story about that. Like, that's how close he was to Christ. He was able to joke during tough situations, too, which we love about him is to be joyful, to have fun.
Yeah.
It's not bad we don't have to be downtrodden and sad. Yes, there's hard times. But in the end, there's hope. And we can laugh, we can be human. And that attracts other people to him, too, maybe non-Catholics. Really saw him as an example of what it was like to be Jesus Christ. Obviously, he's not Jesus Christ. He's the representative of Jesus Christ on earth he's a vehicle. But what a powerful vehicle he was. He allowed God to take over, and that allowed him to be the light of the world. like he was.
Yeah.
And the light of the world, in the sense that he traveled, I don't think any other pope has traveled as much as JP2. I mean, he traveled throughout the whole world pretty much, giving the message of Christ and giving hope to the sick, those that were forgotten. He really knew the power of suffering and really thought of the sick as a great thing for the church to help. He understood the importance of that.
Yeah. He always emphasized the dignity of the human person, that there is a real dignity to being human, and because of Christ. Jesus Christ took on our humanity, and in doing so, he elevated humanity. And that was the lens, I think, through which he looked at the world and looked at people. The dignity of the workers, the dignity of the unborn. He encouraged everyone from every walk of life to be who God created them to be. And it's really a great blessing that we were alive to be influenced by JP2.
It influenced people
Yeah.
for a long time because of his writings. And also, we love the fact that, all the popes were devoted to Our Lady, but he really took it upon himself. I think, what was his motto? Totus Tuus.
Totally yours.
And you can kind of tell that his joy came from his devotion to Mary. Really helped his spiritual life immensely, obviously, as we know. But he really showed that as an example, too, the importance of devotion to Mary, which is very crucial in our Catholic faith.
Yes, it is. And, we'll talk more about that in a future podcast. But the importance of having Marian devotion. And it was Pope John Paul II who really made me think about the importance of having Marian devotion. Yeah. And his motto, yes, it was Totus Tuus, totally yours. And, and it's based on the True Devotion to Mary by Louis de Montfort, St. Louis de Montfort. His spirituality was that of doing everything for Jesus through Mary. His whole life was an act of offering himself to Christ through Mary. That's how he lived his life. And Joe, at the end of his life, when he got a tracheostomy, he couldn't speak, and I'm sure it was very frustrating for him. But little did I know, a few years after seeing him on tracheostomy, I would end up on a tracheostomy. And thinking about JP2 really helped get me through it.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
he really was a powerful influence. I just like to tell a little bit about when I met the Pope in Rome. It was a tough trip. We went with some young adult group, which was really cool, really nice people. But because I was in a wheelchair, I was able to get close up, really close to the Pope. So he came up and he was in a little, looked like kind of like a cart. It wasn't the Pope mobile. It was like a cart that drove him. It was like a little thing they had set up, and he would wield like 10 feet away from me. I remember my heart was pounding. Like, is this really happening? This is crazy. I was able to see such a historic figure, but it was, as you said, it was tough to see him struggle. Like, he was even coughing. You can tell he wasn't going to be around long. But he kept trying to, like, get the words out. But it would take some time. And you hear the people kind of cheering him on, like, come on, you can. It was like, it
Yeah.
was kind of cool, and he kept continuing, even though you could tell it was really hard. You're like,
Yeah.
it was just very, very touching to me, and it was pretty cool. I was able to get a blessing from the Pope.
Wow.
It was really cool, and you know, I knew he wouldn't be around much longer. You could just tell, and fortunately, I was given the ability to be able to go over to Rome and be there, and it was such a life-changing experience, and thank God I was able to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been awesome. I mean, when I saw his funeral on TV, you saw so many people outside his room, you know,
Yeah.
just praying for him and wishing him well.
He basically died on the eve of the feast day that he put in place, the Divine Mercy. Like, he actually, on that day, it was such a huge devotion to that, and it was just amazing how he actually died on the eve of the vigil of that feast day.
Yeah.
And actually, I heard he received communion, which would count for Sunday. So, Harold, do you want to explain a little bit about the Divine Mercy? A little bit, like, just the devotion of it, and then I'll tell how Pope John Paul was pretty influential in getting that pushed through.
Jesus appeared to this Polish nun. She's a saint now, Saint Faustina, whom the Pope canonized in the year 2000. And along with that, he canonized her message of divine mercy that Jesus Christ entrusted to her. He gave her a message of mercy. He wanted the world to know that God is love, God is mercy. That, you know, the greater the sinner, the greater their right to his mercy. Like, you can have one foot in hell and the other foot on a banana peel, and there's still hope for you. You can still have recourse to his mercy. You can still, no matter how bad it's been, you can still come back. And Christ is waiting for the sinner to return.
Yeah.
And it's really a powerful message.
Yeah, really touching to realize the love of God, and not to forget about that.
Yeah.
Like, he wants us to come back. And you're right, even the worst sinner in the world, God wants them to come back, and he's trying to pull them back.
Yeah, and you know, this Pope, he was very influenced by the message of divine mercy. Being Polish and everything, he was familiar with it, and he's the one that helped get it approved and get it, you know, get the whole process rolling.
Yeah.
You know.
And at times there was, I believe there was a time, I think 1959, the church kind of put some prohibitions on it because I guess there was like a faulty translation that kind of pushed the process back for a while. But Pope John Paul II, I believe he got one of his archbishops to go in there and get everything together, you know, to get her cause heard. And eventually the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith came back and said, you know, those restrictions of prohibitions are now removed because of the inquiries of Pope John Paul II and some Polish people that were close to her, that those inquiries were very important in getting the process finally moved through, or eventually, I think, in 93 she was beatified. But it's just an amazing story how that was a part of his The whole thing was, it was part of his mission was to bring this devotion. He really felt that as a mission, to devotion to divine mercy, and he really showed it too. You know, it's not just God's mercy, but sometimes we forget that. Like in the Bible, remember where they had the guy where he got forgiven all this debt, but then he went and didn't forgive another debt. It's kind of scary. We have to remember that we have to do that as well. God's forgiven us for so much, and yet sometimes we forget and are harsh with other people.
Yeah. So you want to share a little bit about how he lived divine mercy, how JP2 lived this message of mercy?
Well, very concretely, he went and visited the guy that almost took his life. He went in there and forgave the guy, and actually went and visited him. And what could be more powerful than that? Just an amazing man. Actually, this takes divine grace, because if it were you or I, we'd be pretty upset.
Yeah, I know.
And I probably wouldn't want to visit the guy.
You wonder what they talked about and, you know, what he said to him. But you could see that was real. That was real. And Pope John Paul II, he was real.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? He was authentic. He made
that was the best description he gave. He's real. He really believes it, and he really, with his heart, really is in love with Christ.
Yeah. And
you can tell that, and the way he dealt with people was very, very gentle, but very stern. Stern in a good way.
Yeah.
Like a father.
Yeah.
He really was a holy father.
Yeah, he really tended to the sheep, and he you know, saw himself as one who is to spread this message of mercy to the world. And I remember one of his quotes from World Youth Day was, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was telling the congregation about, I think it was close to 1 million, if I'm not mistaken, but he said, you are not the sum of your weakness. You are not the sum of your weaknesses, but you are the sum of your real capacity to become children of God. So we are not defined by what we can't do. You know, again, it's something we always talk about. We are not defined by something by what we cannot do. We're defined by what we can do. We are capable of, and we are capable of receiving mercy and dispensing mercy to everyone that we meet. So that about sums up.
Pretty much, that does sum it up.
It's like,
I mean,
there's a lot more we can probably say about him, but it would probably take about 3 or 4
we'd probably be here for like 10 hours.
So, yeah.
And I don't think people have 10 hours. But hopefully our 25 minutes did a good job of at least telling us how we feel about Pope John Paul the Great, Saint John Paul the Great. So it was a great podcast. We love to do it. Took some time. You know, we have different schedules, but we got it done today. I'm really pumped up about that. That we're continuing to do this with the help of the Holy Spirit and Christ and Mary. We're going to keep this thing going, and it's going to be pretty cool. And we thank everyone for being a part of episode 3. We'll probably have episode 4, probably in a couple weeks. We're going to figure out what the topic's going to be. But we hope to have you along for the ride. Have a good evening, and this is Signs of Contradiction.
There's nothing I can do when I believe in you. In this world of stress, obstacles and tests, oh, I will go my